I was standing in the mosque, facing over 200 people, preaching about the inferiority of Christians. I had done this for 30 years. 30 years repeating the same words, the same teachings, the same absolute certainty. But that Friday morning, something different happened. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, as if it belonged to someone else. And while I spoke, the afternoon light filtered through the colored glass windows, casting red and gold patterns on the worn prayer rugs below, and I noticed how the dust particles floated in those beams of light like tiny spirits. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the accumulated prayers of decades. And while I spoke, a single question hammered inside my head. What if I'm wrong? My name is Rashid. I was born in a small town in North Africa, son of a respected Imam. My father was known for his rigidity, his unwavering devotion, and I grew up watching his every move, memorizing every word that came out of his mouth. Our house stood at the edge of the Medina, a two-story structure with white walls that my mother repainted every spring. The courtyard had a small fountain that gurgled constantly, and I used to sit beside it doing my memorization work, the sound of water mixing with the call to prayer that echoed from our mosque 5 times a day. At 5 years old, I was already reciting entire passages from the Quran. My father would sit across from me in his study, the room smelling of old books and the mint tea he constantly drank, nodding with satisfaction when I got the verses perfect, frowning with disappointment when I stumbled. At 10, I knew most of the hadiths by heart. My father told me I would be a great spiritual leader, that Allah had special plans for me, and I believed it with every fiber of my being. If you're hearing this story today, I want to ask you something real quick. Could you hit that subscribe button and leave a like? It really helps this testimony reach more people who might need to hear it. I never thought my story would matter to anyone outside my community, but here we are. And honestly, every person who hears this might be exactly the person who needs to hear it most. The mosque where I grew up smelled of incense and old carpets. The walls were covered with intricate geometric patterns that I used to trace with my fingers while waiting for prayer time, imagining stories in those endless interlocking shapes. The mihrab, the prayer niche that pointed toward Mecca, was decorated with verses in beautiful calligraphy that my grandfather had painted himself before he died. Every morning at 4:30, before the sun broke through the darkness, I heard my father's voice calling the faithful to prayer. His voice was deep, resonant, powerful. It echoed through the narrow streets of our town, bouncing off the white walls of houses, waking people from their dreams. And I felt proud knowing that voice belonged to my father. People respected him. They feared him too. My mother was a quiet woman who wore the full niqab whenever she left the house. I rarely saw her face except within our home. She taught me to read Arabic before I started formal schooling, her finger tracing the letters in the Quran while she hummed softly. She made this bread every morning, fresh and warm, the smell filling our entire house, and I would eat it with olive oil and honey before going to the mosque for dawn prayers. She never spoke during meals when my father was present. She never questioned his authority. And she raised me to believe that this was the natural order of things, the way Allah intended families to function. When I turned 14, my father began training me seriously. "Rashid," he would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder, his fingers digging in just enough to make me stand straighter. "You will carry this message when I'm gone. You must be stronger than steel, sharper than any blade." I was standing in the mosque, facing over 200 people, preaching about the inferiority of Christians. I had done this for 30 years. 30 years repeating the same words, the same teachings, the same absolute certainty. But that Friday morning, something different happened. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, as if it belonged to someone else. And while I spoke, the afternoon light filtered through the colored glass windows, casting red and gold patterns on the worn prayer rugs below, and I noticed how the dust particles floated in those beams of light like tiny spirits. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the accumulated prayers of decades. And while I spoke, a single question hammered inside my head. What if I'm wrong? My name is Rashid. I was born in a small town in North Africa, son of a respected Imam. My father was known for his rigidity, his unwavering devotion, and I grew up watching his every move, memorizing every word that came out of his mouth. Our house stood at the edge of the Medina, a two-story structure with white walls that my mother repainted every spring. The courtyard had a small fountain that gurgled constantly, and I used to sit beside it doing my memorization work, the sound of water mixing with the call to prayer that echoed from our mosque 5 times a day. At 5 years old, I was already reciting entire passages from the Quran. My father would sit across from me in his study, the room smelling of old books and the mint tea he constantly drank, nodding with satisfaction when I got the verses perfect, frowning with disappointment when I stumbled. At 10, I knew most of the hadiths by heart. My father told me I would be a great spiritual leader, that Allah had special plans for me, and I believed it with every fiber of my being. If you're hearing this story today, I want to ask you something real quick. Could you hit that subscribe button and leave a like? It really helps this testimony reach more people who might need to hear it. I never thought my story would matter to anyone outside my community, but here we are. And honestly, every person who hears this might be exactly the person who needs to hear it most. The mosque where I grew up smelled of incense and old carpets. The walls were covered with intricate geometric patterns that I used to trace with my fingers while waiting for prayer time, imagining stories in those endless interlocking shapes. The mihrab, the prayer niche that pointed toward Mecca, was decorated with verses in beautiful calligraphy that my grandfather had painted himself before he died. Every morning at 4:30, before the sun broke through the darkness, I heard my father's voice calling the faithful to prayer. His voice was deep, resonant, powerful. It echoed through the narrow streets of our town, bouncing off the white walls of houses, waking people from their dreams. And I felt proud knowing that voice belonged to my father. People respected him. They feared him too. My mother was a quiet woman who wore the full niqab whenever she left the house. I rarely saw her face except within our home. She taught me to read Arabic before I started formal schooling, her finger tracing the letters in the Quran while she hummed softly. She made this bread every morning, fresh and warm, the smell filling our entire house, and I would eat it with olive oil and honey before going to the mosque for dawn prayers. She never spoke during meals when my father was present. She never questioned his authority. And she raised me to believe that this was the natural order of things, the way Allah intended families to function. When I turned 14, my father began training me seriously. "Rashid," he would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder, his fingers digging in just enough to make me stand straighter. "You will carry this message when I'm gone. You must be stronger than steel, sharper than any blade. Our faith is under attack from the West. From the Christians who want to destroy Islam, you must teach our people to remain pure, to reject their poisonous influence." I absorbed every word. I believed the world was divided into two camps, us and them, the faithful and the infidels. There was no middle ground, no gray area, no room for doubt or compromise. My father showed me articles about Christian missionaries in Africa, about Muslim-majority countries being invaded by Western powers, about the crusades that happened centuries ago as if they had ended yesterday. He taught me that Christians were polytheists who worshipped three gods, that they had corrupted the original message of Prophet Isa, turning him into something he never claimed to be. "They say he is the Son of God." My father would spit, his face contorted with disgust. "Blasphemy. God has no son. God has no partners. This is shirk, the unforgivable sin." At 18, I became an assistant imam at our mosque. I led prayers when my father was traveling. I taught Quran classes to young boys who reminded me of myself at that age, eager and devoted and absolutely certain. At 25, after my father's death from a sudden heart attack, he collapsed during evening prayers, his face hitting the mihrab, blood from his broken nose staining the white marble. I took his place. The transition was seamless. I knew exactly what to say, how to say it, when to raise my voice and when to lower it to a whisper. I had watched my father do it thousands of times. The sermons I delivered were fire and certainty. I taught that Christians had corrupted the true message of Isa, that they worshiped three gods instead of one, that their Bible was a distorted text full of lies and contradictions fabricated at the Council of Nicaea. I taught that Muslims who befriended Christians were placing their souls in danger, that such friendships were a form of betrayal against Allah and the Ummah. I remember one sermon in particular, delivered about 8 years into my tenure as Imam. A Christian aid organization had come to our region to dig wells and provide medical care. Some in the community were grateful, but I saw it as a threat, a Trojan horse designed to weaken our faith. I preached for 45 minutes about the dangers of accepting help from kafirs, from unbelievers. "They come with their medicine and their water," I said, my voice rising. "But what they really want is your soul. They want to convert you, to lead you away from the straight path. Do not be deceived by their kindness. Satan himself appears as an angel of light." The congregation nodded. They agreed. They thanked me afterward for my strong stance, for protecting them. My wife Amina was the daughter of another Imam from a neighboring town. Our marriage was arranged when I was 22 and she was 17. I met her exactly twice before our wedding day. The first time was at her father's house, with both families present, where we sat in the same room but barely spoke. The second time was at the formal engagement ceremony where we signed papers and exchanged gifts. She was quiet, obedient, deeply religious. She wore beautiful embroidered dresses beneath her abaya, and her eyes, the only part of her I could see in public, were dark brown and expressive. We had 4 children together, 3 sons and a daughter. Our home was organized around prayer times, Quranic study, and preparation for my sermons. Every evening after dinner, we would sit together in the main room, the tile floor cool beneath us, the ceiling fan rotating slowly overhead, and I would teach the children about Islam, about their responsibilities as Muslims, about the dangers of the modern world. Amina never questioned me. No one did. I was Imam Rashid, keeper of the truth, defender of the faith. When community members had disputes, they came to me. When young couples wanted to marry, I performed the ceremony. When someone died, I led the funeral prayers and spoke words of comfort to the family. I was woven into the fabric of that community in ways that went far beyond just being a religious leader. I was a counselor, a judge, a teacher, a symbol of continuity and stability. For 30 years, I lived inside this fortress of certainty. I published articles denouncing Christian missionaries who tried to work in our region. Local newspapers printed my opinion pieces. I organized protests when a church was built 15 miles from our town, leading a march of 300 people who carried signs and chanted slogans. I counseled young men to avoid any contact with Christians, warning them about the spiritual contamination that came from such interactions. Their ideas are like disease, I told them. Once they enter your mind, they spread and corrupt everything. And I felt righteous doing it. I felt like I was protecting my community, my family, my faith from an existential threat. But something began to change in my late 40s. It started small, like a tiny crack in a massive wall that you barely notice until water starts seeping through. One of my sons, Kareem, my youngest, came home from university with questions. He was studying medicine in the capital city, living in a dormitory with students from all over the country and even some international students. And he had met people from different backgrounds: Christians, Jews, even atheists. "Father," he said one evening, his voice careful, respectful, knowing he was treading on dangerous ground. "I met a Christian student who volunteers at the Children's Hospital. She spends her weekends caring for sick kids who have no one. She doesn't get paid, she doesn't preach, she just serves. She changes diapers, feeds them, reads to them, holds them when they cry. How do we explain that?" I felt anger rise in my chest like bile. "It's a deception," I told him firmly, my jaw clenched. "She's trying to win converts through good works. It's a tactic, an old Christian trick. They do these things to make themselves look good, to make Islam look bad by comparison. Don't be fooled, Kareem. Don't let your guard down." But my son's eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Doubt. Not in me, but in the simple explanations I had always provided, the neat categories I had always used to sort the world. He nodded and left the room, his footsteps heavy on the stairs, and his question lingered in the air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. That conversation bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I found myself thinking about it at odd times, during prayers, while preparing sermons, late at night when I couldn't sleep. I told myself I had answered Kareem correctly, that my explanation was sound, but something about it felt hollow, incomplete. Around that same time, I received a package at the mosque. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by the regular postal carrier who handed it to me with a smile. There was no return address, just my name and the mosque's address written in neat handwriting. Inside was a Quran, a beautiful edition with Arabic text and English translation side by side, the pages edged in gold, the binding leather. There was also a note, handwritten on expensive paper, that said, "Imam Rashid, I pray you would read Surah 3, verse 55 with fresh eyes. A Christian brother who loves you in the name of Isa al-Masih." I was furious. Who was this person? How dare they send me this? How dare they claim to love me while insulting me with Christian terminology? I nearly threw the whole package in the trash right there in the mosque office, my hands shaking with rage. But curiosity got the better of me. Late that night, alone in my study with only a small lamp casting shadows on the walls, the house silent except for the sound of crickets outside and the distant barking of a dog, I opened the Quran to Surah 3. Verse 55. I had read this verse hundreds of times before. I knew it by memory. I had quoted it in sermons. But this time, something stopped me cold. The verse spoke about Allah raising Isa, Jesus, to himself and purifying him from those who disbelieve, and making those who follow Isa superior to those who disbelieve until the day of resurrection. I sat there, staring at those words, reading them again and again, making those who follow Isa superior. Superior, not inferior, not corrupted, not lost, not misguided. Superior. The Arabic word was clear. Fawq, above. Superior. My hands began to shake. This couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake in this translation. I grabbed 3 other translations from my shelf, different editions I had collected over the years. Each one said essentially the same thing. Those who follow Jesus would be made superior until the day of judgment. But I had spent 30 years teaching the exact opposite. I had built my entire ministry on the premise that Christians were misguided, inferior, destined for hell unless they converted to Islam. And here was the Quran itself, our holy book, the unchangeable word of Allah, saying something completely different. I pulled out commentary after commentary, works by respected scholars, trying to find an explanation that would resolve this contradiction. Most of them performed interpretive gymnastics. They said it referred only to the true followers of Jesus before Muhammad came, not to Christians today. They said it meant Muslims who believe in Jesus as a prophet. They said the superiority was temporary, or spiritual but not practical, or metaphorical rather than literal. But the more I read, the more strained these explanations seemed. The text said what it said, and I had been ignoring it or explaining it away for 3 decades. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay beside Amina, listening to her gentle breathing, the way she sometimes made small sounds in her sleep, and felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window, illuminating the dresser where Amina kept her prayer beads and a small bottle of rosewater she used after ablutions. If I had been wrong about this, what else had I been wrong about? The question was too big, too terrifying. I pushed it away and told myself I would study more, find the proper interpretation, talk to other scholars. There had to be an explanation that preserved everything I believed, that kept my world intact. Where are you watching this from right now? What city? What country? Because I want you to know something. In that moment, lying in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to my wife sleep, staring at the ceiling fan that rotated slowly above us, I felt completely alone. More alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. Even though my wife was right beside me, even though my children were sleeping in rooms down the hall, even though I was surrounded by a community that respected me, I felt utterly isolated. And if you've ever had your entire worldview start to crack apart, you know that feeling. You know how terrifying it is when the foundation you've built your whole life on starts to shift. So wherever you are right now, just know you're not alone in that fear. I've been there, and Jesus met me there. Over the next several weeks, I became obsessed with that verse. I read every commentary I could find. I ordered books from abroad, obscure scholarly works that cost more money than I wanted to spend. I stayed up late into the night, surrounded by stacks of volumes, making notes, comparing translations, trying to find a way to make this verse say something other than what it clearly said. My eyes would burn from reading by lamplight. I would drink cup after cup of coffee to stay awake, the bitter taste coating my tongue. Amina noticed my obsession. "Rashid, what are you working on?" she asked me one evening. "You seem consumed by something." I told her I was preparing a comprehensive sermon series on the prophets. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. I started having dreams. Vivid, disturbing dreams, unlike anything I had experienced before. In one dream, I was standing before a great throne in a vast hall that seemed to stretch into infinity. The floor was like polished crystal, reflecting everything, and all around me were beings of light, their faces covered, singing in languages I couldn't understand. And a figure of light sat upon the throne, radiating brilliance that should have blinded me but somehow didn't. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his gaze pierce right through me, seeing every thought I'd ever had, every word I'd ever spoken, every secret I'd ever kept. And he asked me one question. "Rashid, why did you teach my children to hate those who love me?" I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might die right there. The sheets were soaked. I got up, went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stood there looking at myself in the mirror, wondering if I was losing my mind. The dreams continued. In another, I saw Jesus. I knew it was him, even though I had never believed in his divinity, hanging on a cross. But instead of Romans nailing him there, it was me. I was driving the nails through his hands while he looked at me with eyes full of sorrow and love. Never anger, never hatred. "Father, forgive him," he said. "He doesn't know what he's doing." I woke up weeping, tears streaming down my face, my pillow wet. I began to change, slowly, carefully. I stopped preaching the harshest sermons against Christians. I softened my language. When discussing other faiths, I chose my words more carefully, focusing more on what we believed than on attacking what others believed. People noticed. "Imam Rashid, are you feeling well?" One of the elders asked me after Friday prayers, his hand on my shoulder, his face concerned. "You seem different lately, less passionate, less clear. We need strong leadership in these times of moral confusion." I forced a smile and said I was fine, just tired, dealing with some family matters. But I wasn't fine. I was coming apart at the seams, trying to hold together a version of myself that no longer fit. Then something happened that forced my hand. A young Christian woman was attacked in the market by a group of men from a neighboring town. Her name was Miriam. She was 23 years old, worked as a teacher at a small Christian school, and she wore a headscarf as an act of respect when she shopped in our Muslim-majority area. She had come to buy vegetables and bread. The men surrounded her near the fruit vendor's stall, the smell of overripe mangoes and fresh mint in the air, afternoon sun beating down on the dusty street. They recognized her as Christian from the small cross necklace that slipped out from beneath her scarf. They called her a whore and an infidel and a spy for Western missionaries. They beat her with their fists and with sticks. They tore her hijab off, pulled her hair, threw her to the ground. Someone kicked her in the ribs repeatedly. The sound of bone cracking, her screaming, blood on the pavement. Other people in the market just watched. Some cheered. No one intervened. She was hospitalized with 3 broken ribs, a concussion, a broken nose, and internal bleeding. The incident caused outrage among some, but others justified it. "She shouldn't have been here," they said. "She was provoking us with her presence." I visited her in the hospital. I don't know why I did it. Something compelled me. I told Amina I was visiting a community member who was ill, which was technically true. Miriam was in a small room on the 3rd floor. White walls, the smell of antiseptic and medicine, machines beeping quietly. Her face was swollen and bruised, purple and yellow and black. Her eyes could barely open. A woman I assumed was her mother sat beside the bed, holding her hand, softly singing a hymn I didn't recognize. "I'm Imam Rashid," I said from the doorway. I came to apologize. For what happened. For my community." The mother looked at me with eyes full of tears and anger. "Your community did this," she said. "Your teachings did this." I couldn't argue. She was right. "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Miriam stirred slightly, managed to open her eyes enough to see me. "Do you forgive them?" I found myself asking, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, her voice weak and pained, "Jesus forgave those who crucified him. How can I do less?" I left that hospital room shaking. Her words echoed in my mind for days. She had every right to hate us, to call for justice, for revenge. She had been brutalized for no reason other than her faith. And yet she spoke of forgiveness. I thought of all the sermons I had preached about the righteous anger of Allah, about the necessity of jihad against those who opposed Islam, about justice and retribution. And here was this broken young woman speaking of forgiveness with a conviction that came from somewhere beyond herself. I was expected to make a statement about the attack. The community waited to hear from me. Some wanted me to condemn it. Others wanted me to defend it, or at least minimize it. I stood in the mosque that Friday, and every eye was on me. More than 300 people had come, the most I had seen in years. They wanted me to provide moral clarity, to tell them how to think about this incident. The afternoon heat made the air inside thick and heavy. I could smell the sweat of the crowd, see the expectation on their faces. And instead of giving them what they expected, I said this: what those men did was wrong. It was evil. There is no other word for it. They attacked an innocent woman who was doing nothing but shopping for food. They brutalized her in the name of Islam, but what they did was not Islam. It was savagery. And if we celebrate it or excuse it or minimize it, we are participating in that evil. We become complicit. That woman is a human being, created by Allah, and she deserves dignity and protection regardless of her faith. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on those old carpets. People looked at each other, confused, some angry, some shocked. I saw faces harden. I saw whispers begin. After the service, 3 elders approached me in my office. Their expressions were stern. "Imam, what has happened to you? Have you forgotten who we are? Have you forgotten what they represent? Christians are not innocent victims. They are agents of Western imperialism, of cultural colonization. That woman was probably here to spy, to convert vulnerable Muslims. The men who attacked her went too far, perhaps, but their anger was righteous." I looked at these men I had known for decades, and realized we were speaking completely different languages. "Her anger would have been righteous," I said. "Their anger was just cruelty dressed up as religion." They left my office without another word, their faces dark with disapproval. Word spread quickly through the community. Within days, rumors were flying like dust in a sandstorm. Imam Rashid is sympathizing with Christians. Imam Rashid is losing his faith. Imam Rashid has been compromised, paid off, brainwashed. Someone spray-painted "apostate" on the wall of the mosque in red paint. I received anonymous letters threatening me, warning me to correct my course or face consequences. My eldest son called from the university, his voice tight with anger. "Father, do you know what people are saying about you? About our family? I'm being harassed. People are asking if you've converted to Christianity. What am I supposed to tell them?" My wife finally confronted me one evening. We were alone in the house, the children all gone for various reasons, the silence between us heavy and oppressive. "Rashid, what is going on? People are talking. They're saying terrible things about you, about us. Our sons are being questioned at university, investigated by campus security. Our daughter came home crying today because her friends won't speak to her anymore. The other families are excluding her. You need to fix this. You need to make this right." I looked at her, this woman I had lived with for more than 25 years, and realized I couldn't explain what was happening to me. How could I tell her that everything we had built our lives on, everything we had taught our children, everything we had believed with absolute certainty, might be a lie? How could I tell her about the verse that haunted me, the dreams that tormented me, the Christian woman's forgiveness that had broken something open inside me? "Amina," I said, my voice breaking, tears filling my eyes. "What if we've been wrong? What if Jesus is who the Christians say he is? What if he really is the Son of God? What if he really did die for our sins and rise again? What if everything we've taught, everything we've believed, has been wrong?" She stepped back from me as if I had struck her across the face. Her hand went to her mouth. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Don't you ever say that again," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't you ever say that in this house. Don't you even think it. You're not well, Rashid. You're sick. You need help. You need to see someone. Talk to other imams. Get your mind right." Then she left the room, and I heard her crying in our bedroom, deep sobs that seemed to come from the very center of her being. I knew I had to make a decision. I could continue down this path and lose everything: my position, my family, my community, my reputation, my income, my home, my safety, possibly my life. Or I could push all these doubts away, get back in line, and preach what I had always preached. It would be so easy. I could apologize for my recent statements, blame them on stress or illness, reaffirm my commitment to traditional Islamic teaching, and gradually rebuild my standing. No one would ever know about this crisis of faith. I could bury it deep and move on, live out my days as Imam Rashid, respected and secure. But I couldn't. The question had taken root too deep. The truth was calling me too loudly. I had to know, whatever the cost. I did something I never thought I would do. I reached out to a Christian pastor in the capital city. His name was Pastor Emmanuel. I had actually written articles attacking him years earlier because he ran a church that was growing rapidly, attracting young educated Muslims who were converting to Christianity. I had called him a deceiver, a false prophet, a wolf in sheep's clothing. And now I was sending him an anonymous email, my hands trembling on the keyboard, explaining that I was a Muslim seeking answers about Jesus. He responded within hours. "Brother," he wrote, and the simple kindness of that word brought tears to my eyes. "I would be honored to meet with you. No judgment, no pressure, just conversation. Come as you are." We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from where anyone might recognize me. It was a 3-hour drive, and I spent the entire journey rehearsing what I would say, changing my mind a dozen times about whether to turn around and go home. I wore plain clothes, no Imam garb, just jeans and a simple shirt. I felt naked without my usual religious attire. Pastor Emmanuel was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table. He was a kind-looking man in his 50s, with graying hair and gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He smiled when he saw me, stood up, extended his hand. "Thank you for trusting me enough to meet," he said, and his grip was firm and warm. We ordered coffee, the smell of it mixing with fresh bread from the kitchen, the sound of other conversations creating a kind of protective noise around us, and began to talk. I told him everything. The verse that had troubled me, the dreams that had terrified me, the beating of the Christian woman, Miriam's forgiveness, my son's questions, my growing sense that I had been wrong about so much for so long. The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam, and I couldn't stop them. I told him about my father, about my 30 years as an imam, about the sermons I had preached against Christians, about the hatred I had encouraged. I told him I was afraid, confused, desperate for answers. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving mine, and I felt truly seen for the first time in my life. When I finished, my coffee was cold and untouched. He was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Then he said, "Rashid, can I tell you what I believe?" I nodded, my throat tight. I believe Jesus is exactly who he said he is. Not just a prophet, not just a good teacher, not just a wise man or a revolutionary or a moral example. He is the Son of God, the perfect revelation of God's love for humanity, God in human flesh. He came to earth, lived a sinless life, died on a cross for our sins, and rose again 3 days later, conquering death itself. And he offers forgiveness, redemption, and eternal life to anyone who believes in him and follows him. Not by our good works, not by our religious performance, not by how many prayers we say or how perfectly we follow religious law, but by his grace alone, through faith alone. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't know why. "But I've spent 30 years teaching people to hate him," I said, my voice cracking, barely above a whisper. "I've said terrible things about him, about his followers. I've encouraged violence. I've spread lies. I've damaged people's faith in him. How could he ever forgive me? How could he want anything to do with someone like me?" Pastor Emmanuel reached across the table and put his hand on mine. His touch was gentle, fatherly. "That's exactly what the cross is for, Rashid. For people like you, for people like me, for everyone who has sinned and fallen short of God's glory. Jesus doesn't ask you to clean yourself up first. He doesn't require you to earn his forgiveness or prove your worthiness. He asks you to come as you are, broken and guilty and desperate, and let him transform you. He's not afraid of your past. He already knows all of it, and he loves you anyway." We talked for 3 hours. The cafe began to empty as afternoon turned to evening. He showed me passages in the Bible, the Injil, that spoke about Jesus' identity, his sacrifice, his resurrection. We read from the Gospel of John about Jesus being the Word made flesh. We read from Romans about how while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We read from 1 John about God's love being perfected in those who follow Jesus. He explained the Trinity in a way I had never heard before, not as 3 gods, but as one God eternally existing in 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, united in essence, distinct in person, perfect in love. He told me about his own journey to faith. He had grown up Muslim too, in a different country, and had come to Christ in his 20s after reading the Gospels out of curiosity. His family had disowned him. He had lost friends, opportunities, security, but he had gained everything that truly mattered. "I won't lie to you," he said. "Following Jesus will cost you dearly. It cost me everything I thought defined me. But Rashid, what I gained was worth infinitely more than what I lost." When we parted, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple and red. He gave me a Bible, a beautiful leather-bound copy. "Read the Gospel of John," he said. "Start there, and pray." Ask Jesus to reveal himself to you. He will. I promise you, he will. I went home that night with the Bible hidden under my jacket, wrapped in a plastic bag like contraband. I felt like a criminal. In my community, possessing a Bible was seen as an act of betrayal, evidence of apostasy. If anyone found it, I would be in serious danger. I hid it in my study, behind other books on a high shelf. And late that night, when everyone was asleep and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, I began to read. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The opening words of John's Gospel hit me like a physical force, like being struck in the chest. I had to stop and catch my breath. I read about Jesus turning water into wine at a wedding, his first miracle. I read about him talking with a Samaritan woman at a well, crossing social and religious boundaries that were supposed to be uncrossable. I read about him healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, making the lame walk. I read about him raising Lazarus from the dead after 4 days in the tomb, the smell of death already on him. I read about Jesus washing his disciples' feet, the creator of the universe kneeling before his creatures with a towel and a basin of water. I read about his teaching with authority, unlike anything the world had ever seen, speaking truth that cut through religious pretense and human pride. I read about his compassion for the broken, the outcast, the sinner, the ones that religious leaders like me had rejected and condemned. I read about his betrayal by Judas, his trial before Pilate, the crown of thorns pressed into his skull, the whip tearing his flesh, the nails driven through his hands and feet. I read about his crucifixion, how he hung there between heaven and earth, bearing the weight of human sin, dying the death we deserved. And I read about the empty tomb, about Mary Magdalene finding it vacant, about Jesus appearing to his disciples, about Thomas touching his wounds and declaring, "My Lord and my God." I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally closed the book, the sun was beginning to rise. The first calls to prayer would start soon, and I knew, with a certainty that came from somewhere beyond myself, beyond reason, beyond everything I had been taught, that it was all true. Every word. Jesus was who he claimed to be. He had died for me. He had risen. He had conquered death. And he was offering me a way out of the darkness I had been living in for 50 years. I fell to my knees right there in my study, my body trembling, tears streaming down my face. And for the first time in my life, I prayed a prayer that wasn't memorized, wasn't ritualistic, wasn't performed out of duty or fear or obligation. "Jesus," I whispered, my voice breaking, "if you're really there, if you really died for me, I need you. I can't do this anymore. I can't live this lie. I can't carry this burden. I'm sorry for everything I've said against you. I'm sorry for every person I turned away from you. I'm sorry for 30 years of hatred and lies. Please forgive me. Please save me. Please show me the truth." Nothing dramatic happened. No lightning bolt from heaven. No audible voice. No vision of angels. But I felt something shift inside me, deep in my chest, where I carry all my fears and guilt and shame. A weight I had been carrying for decades. A weight I didn't even know was there until it lifted, suddenly gone. And I experienced peace, deep and profound and completely inexplicable, washing over me like warm water, filling places inside me that had been cold and hard and dead for as long as I could remember. I had found the truth. But I knew, even in that moment of peace, that accepting it would cost me everything. The next morning I told Amina. We were in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, the smell of fresh bread and boiling eggs filling the air. I stood in the doorway watching her, knowing that what I was about to say would destroy our life together. "Amina," I said, my voice quiet, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at me, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What is it?" "I've become a follower of Jesus," I said. Simple words, world-ending words. I believe he is the Son of God. I believe he died for my sins and rose again. I can't be an Imam anymore. I can't preach Islam anymore. Everything has changed. She didn't yell this time. She just stared at me, her face going through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, grief. Then tears started streaming down her face. "You're leaving Islam?" she whispered. I nodded. "I'm following Jesus now, Amina. It's the truth. I know it's the truth." She set down the bread she was holding and walked past me to our bedroom. I heard drawers opening, clothes being moved. She came out 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases packed. "I cannot stay married to an apostate," she said, her voice hollow, empty of emotion. "You have shamed this family. You have destroyed us. You have condemned yourself to hell and taken our honor with you." She called her brother to come pick her up. She didn't look at me again. Our daughter, who was home from school, started crying, asking what was happening. Amina took her hand and said, "Your father is no longer Muslim. We have to leave." Within 2 hours, they were gone. My sons came to see me one by one over the next few days. My eldest, Ahmad, came first. He was furious, shouting at me, calling me a traitor, a fool, asking how I could throw away everything for a Western religion, for lies, for the religion of colonizers. "You've disgraced our family name," he said. "My grandfather would die of shame if he could see you now. How dare you? How dare you?" I tried to explain about the verse, about the dreams, about meeting Jesus in the pages of Scripture. He didn't want to hear it. He left and never came back. My second son, Tariq, was colder. He just looked at me with contempt and said, "You're dead to me. Don't ever contact me again." And he walked out. Kareem, my youngest, the one who had first planted the seed of doubt, came last. He just looked at me with sad eyes, tears on his cheeks, and said, "Father, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope it's worth what it's costing you." Then he left too. The mosque leadership called an emergency meeting. 6 elders sat across from me in a conference room that smelled of stale air and old furniture. They demanded I recant publicly. They gave me 1 week to publicly renounce Christianity and reaffirm my Islamic faith, to declare the Shahada before the community, to beg Allah's forgiveness. If I refused, I would be formally excommunicated and expelled from the community. I would lose my position, my home, which was owned by the mosque, my income, my reputation, and they couldn't guarantee my safety. "There are young men in this community," one elder said, his voice low and threatening, "who take apostasy very seriously. We may not be able to control what they do." I met with Pastor Emmanuel again the next day. We sat in his church office, a simple room with a cross on the wall and shelves full of books. "I'm afraid," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. I've lost my wife, my children, my community, and now they're threatening my life. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I moved too fast." He smiled gently, sadly. "You're not strong enough. None of us are. But Jesus is, and He will carry you through whatever comes. Rashid, you've spent 30 years serving a religion of law and fear. Now you're going to learn what it means to live in grace and love. It won't be easy, but it will be real." On the following Friday, I stood before the mosque one final time. The building was packed. More than 400 people had come to see what would happen. Some came hoping to see me repent. Some came hoping to see me condemned. The head elder stood beside me at the front, waiting for my statement. The room was utterly silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. I looked out at all those faces. Many of them I had known since childhood. I had buried their parents, married their children, counseled them through divorces and business failures and health crises. I had sat with them in their grief and celebrated with them in their joy. And now I was about to lose all of them. "I cannot recant," I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "I have found the truth, and His name is Jesus Christ. He is not just a prophet. He is the Son of God. He died for my sins and for yours. He rose from the dead on the 3rd day, conquering death itself, and He offers salvation to anyone who believes in Him and follows Him. I am a follower of Jesus now, and I cannot deny Him. I will not deny Him, even if it costs me everything." The explosion of anger that followed was immediate and overwhelming. People shouted, cursed, called me every vile name imaginable. Someone threw a shoe at me. It hit my shoulder. Another threw a prayer cap. The elders grabbed me roughly by my arms and physically removed me from the building, dragging me through the center aisle while people spat at me. They threw me into the street outside the mosque, into the dust and dirt, and the crowd followed, surrounding me in a circle, screaming. I thought they might kill me right there. I saw some young men picking up stones. This is it, I thought. This is how I die. But then something remarkable happened. Pastor Emmanuel appeared with several members of his church. I don't know how they knew to come, but there they were. About 15 Christians forming a protective circle around me, their arms linked, their bodies shielding mine. "Leave him alone," Emmanuel shouted, his voice strong and clear. "He is our brother now. If you want to hurt him, you'll have to go through us first." The crowd was shocked into momentary silence, Muslims and Christians facing each other in the street. Then slowly, muttering threats and curses, promising that this wasn't over, the crowd began to disperse. Some of the young men lingered, their faces dark with rage, but eventually they too walked away. Emmanuel and his church members helped me to my feet. My clothes were torn and dusty. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. They took me to their church, gave me clean clothes, water to drink, food to eat. They prayed with me, their hands on my shoulders, asking Jesus to protect me and strengthen me. And I wept, not from fear but from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that I had lost one family but gained another. That was 7 years ago. 7 years since that day in the street. 7 years since I lost everything I thought defined me. And I won't lie to you, it's been the hardest 7 years of my life. I haven't seen most of my children in all that time. My wife divorced me. The Islamic court ruled in her favor, giving her everything. My extended family disowned me. Cousins I grew up with, aunts and uncles who had been part of my life since birth, they all cut me off. I received death threats occasionally, usually on the anniversary of my conversion. I've had to move twice for safety reasons, relocating to different cities where nobody knows my face. But here's what I gained. I found freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind of freedom that lets you do whatever you want, but the kind that sets your soul free from guilt, from fear, from shame, from the exhausting burden of trying to earn God's favor through religious performance. For 30 years I lived under the weight of law, never sure if I had prayed enough, fasted enough, given enough, been righteous enough. And now I live under grace, knowing that Jesus has done everything necessary for my salvation, that nothing I do can add to or subtract from his finished work on the cross. I found love, unconditional and transformative, the kind of love that pursues you even when you're running away, that forgives you even when you don't deserve it, that transforms you from the inside out. I found a relationship with God that's personal and alive, not distant and transactional. I can call God Father now. I can approach him without fear. I can talk to him like he's really listening, because he is. I found a community that welcomed me despite my past, despite everything I had said and done against them. The church that took me in that day 7 years ago became my family. They helped me find work. I'm a teacher now, working at a Christian school, teaching English and history. They helped me find an apartment. They included me in their lives, invited me to their homes for meals, celebrated holidays with me, mourned with me when the pain of losing my children became too much to bear. I work now with Pastor Emmanuel, helping to minister to other Muslims who are seeking Jesus. We run a small outreach program, very quiet, very careful, where we meet with people who have questions about Christianity. Some of them are like I was, imams or religious teachers who have encountered something in Scripture that doesn't fit their theology. Some are young people who have met Christians and seen love in action and want to understand its source. Some are just desperate, broken, searching for truth. I share my story whenever I get the chance. Some people listen with open hearts. Many don't. Some get angry, defensive, accusing me of being a traitor to Islam and to my people. But a few, a precious few, hear the truth and respond. And every time someone comes to faith in Jesus, every time I see that same light come into someone's eyes that came into mine 7 years ago, every time I witness a heart transformed by grace, it makes everything I've lost worth it. Just last month, I received an email. It was from Kareem, my youngest son. He's a doctor now, working in a hospital in Europe. The email was brief. "Father," it said, "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, about what you said, about Jesus. I started reading the Bible. I have questions. Can we talk?" I wept when I read those words. We've been emailing back and forth for weeks now. He hasn't made a decision yet, but he's seeking. He's asking the same questions I asked. And I'm praying every day that Jesus will reveal himself to my son the way he revealed himself to me. I think about that moment in the mosque 7 years ago, when I stood before 200 people preaching hatred, while that question burned in my mind. What if I'm wrong? I was wrong. I was catastrophically, comprehensively wrong about almost everything.